Welcome to Process Unpacked, the podcast where we break down project management challenges to help you work smarter. I'm Amir Khorram, and in every episode, we uncover real-world solutions to streamline workflows and optimize team performance. Today, we're going to dive into a topic every project manager knows all too well: scope creep. Joining me is Kurt Kratchman, CEO of Virti, a company at the forefront of immersive learning technologies. Kurt has led groundbreaking projects that blend cutting-edge tools like AI and VR into scalable solutions. He's seen firsthand how scope creep can threaten even the best-laid plans. In this episode, we'll unpack how Kurt and his team navigate shifting requirements, keeping projects on track, and delivering world-class results without losing sight of the bigger picture. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome to Process Unpacked. Dive into practical insights, expert advice, and real stories from businesses of every size. Join us as we tackle project management challenges like team collaboration and workload management. Let's get started.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Process Unpacked with Meegle. As you can probably tell, we are in a new location, new studio, the Las Vegas studio, 58 floors above the Las Vegas Strip. And who better to join us for our first in-person podcast than Kurt Kratchman, the CEO of Verity. Thank you very much for joining us, Kurt.
Happy to be here. It's great to be in Las Vegas. And to be clear, we live in Las Vegas.
Yes.
As we mentioned earlier, I have a long history with Steve Wynn, and one of my companies, we were the agency of record for building out all their web properties and their marketing. And we were here from the beginning when they were building this. And now we're sitting in a room. So it's
How amazing, right? What a circle of life, right?
Yeah, full cycle.
You saw this property when it was probably just flat dirt on the strip, right?
Yeah, it was a brilliant experience, but glad to be on this level of the floor, not on the ground floor like I was before.
I'm super happy to have you, Kurt. We've known each other for quite some time. We've worked directly and indirectly for a few years now. So it was really important for me to have someone of your expertise and knowledge in the business world, in startups and tech, in projects to be a part of our show. So excited to get started. Maybe if you could tell our audience just what your origin story. Tell us a little bit more about Kurt and your experience leading up to today.
Sure. Thanks. Thank you. And thanks for this opportunity. It's always fun to chat and talk about some of these topics. My career, I would say, started out, if I really go back deep, and I don't want to bore anyone, but I went to Hebrew University as a freshman, and I got a really global experience there, not only from a culture perspective, language, political, economic, but also just human potential. And I evolved my career. My first job out of university was as a traffic engineer in New York City. And people always think of traffic engineers as, I don't know, dealing with all kinds of systems, but I was dealing with vehicular traffic and people. We were literally counting people and vehicles and classifying them at 2,000 locations in New York City in real time.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot about technology. This is pre-internet, and using all kinds of sensors, surveillance methodologies from manual to automation. And as technology became more and more advanced, we automated a lot of things that were once manual. And that was my first introduction to innovation and digital innovation. The internet at the same time was really coming up. And at the time I was using technologies like CAD and GPS and data dumps and a lot of C programming, C#, C+, programming. DOS was the interface that we used on computers, right? I started seeing friends of mine who were at schools like MIT's multimedia program or media program and NYU's ITP program. And I started learning how to take this data and visualize it.
Right.
And I got so excited by the potential of visualizing data that I ended up going to film school in Vancouver to make films, but it was a specialized program for multimedia studies.
Got it.
And I learned how to program, mostly ActionScript and Java and JavaScript and things like that, but basically web technologies. And I learned how to visualize this traffic data. And when we started visualizing it and animating it, because we also used tools like post-production, Adobe Suite at the time before the Cloud Creative Suite. And that changed everything for us.
Right.
Our business blew up and we just expanded. We went from one office to multiple offices to international consulting. We started making software and hardware and so I got really that.
So you could see the data in a different way.
Exactly. We could tell stories with data. We didn't really talk about it that way,
Right.
but that's what was happening.
Yeah.
And people responded to the data narratives. They understood the data when it was animated, when it was visual. and it moved over time. And that experience has set the trajectory for me for the rest of my career. Every company that I worked with, after film school, we started a company right from school. Colleagues of mine started a company called Blast Radius, and it grew to a really large professional services firm, mostly building websites and content management systems for all the major brands like Nike, Nintendo. We worked with a ton of the video game industry, EA, Activision, Vivendi Universal, Infograms, just went on and on. We worked with airlines, we worked with BMW, we worked with J. Crew, we built their e-commerce stores. It's very exciting times to be 1.0.
Yeah.
And our little company grew to hundreds and hundreds of people. We got very big and globally. And then we did it again with another company called Schematic, which focused more on video on the internet this is before YouTube.
Yeah.
So we learned that we were pioneers of video content management systems and skidding players. We did it for the Olympics and for all the major TV studios and networks and Xbox. And we really facilitated streaming video. Schematic was famous for building the first ad model on the web. And we did it for Desperate Housewives, if you remember that.
Yeah, sure.
It was the first, you could watch it live just after the episode ended, and you can stream it in full time. And we created the ad model for that, and that really put us on the map. And then both those companies were sold to WPP. So we scaled them up, we sold them. And then I got involved in aviation-related businesses, software, drone interface businesses, more military type stuff. And then after that, I got more into data businesses. I was working in private equity and venture in Los Angeles. And I was working with Gary Winnick. He was the founder and CEO of Chairman of Global Crossings. Global Crossings laid down fiber optics under the oceans around the world.
Got it.
The backbone of our internet today.
Yeah.
So I worked with some really interesting people, very dynamic.
Yeah.
Taught me a lot about board management and investor and doing turnarounds. It was like a merchant bank family office. I was doing some turnarounds. And so I got involved in a lot of interesting companies, and all those experiences, I had no preparation for.
Right.
I just rolled forward.
Yes.
And I was comfortable with risk, and I was comfortable with managing risk. And I learned a lot of that because I learned the skills in engineering as a project manager, and I learned how to structure things. And I also learned as an entrepreneur how to sometimes say, it's not good enough. It's not right. This technology, we shouldn't be stuck with that. We can find a better way. And we grew up with technologies that were changing so fast that whatever we learned today was obsolete next year. So you can't whatever you build, you always are changing. And we also work with customers and partners who were very ambitious, and they wanted to be the next big thing. And the internet bubble obviously attracted lots of investment, and post-internet bubble attracted different types of investment. But we went from publishing on the web to interactive social media to where things were participant of the end user. We're building now the content, and we were building platforms for that. And none of the technology that I imagined that I was learning in school or throughout the years ever applied future. So it was always something new was coming out. And I think was really compelling. And so that's what leads me up to Verity. After we sold the data company called Grapeshot to Oracle, I was inside Oracle for a few years as an executive and running a global business unit called Oracle Data Cloud. And it was made up of about 7 acquisitions. One of our companies was that, and I was propelled into a position probably over my head with engineering and product development and data science, but really smart people. But we had to do a lot of product integration. We had to do a lot of normalizing of headcount and all these things that have to take place when you're in these big companies. And Oracle is a massive company, 140,000 people.
Huge companies.
Super aggressive and really visionary. And they give you a long leash when you're successful. And we were successful for a while, but then when the industry changed around data and privacy, things shifted quite a bit. And during COVID, I rolled out of Oracle Data Cloud because I was looking for a new adventure. And I think after you do enough startups and enough exits, you have this cumulative PTSD. And I let that sort of sit for a while. And then COVID hit, everyone just shut down.
Yeah.
And I think I gained so much weight, lost hair, wrinkles, and when everything was just out of balance, right? And so I spent some time rebalancing. Yeah. And the lead investor in my last company, Grapeshot, was the lead investor in Virti. And so I came in to help. They asked if I would be interested in participating in Investor Operator. And so I came in and helped take what was already a really innovative company, really strong at the MVP level, still getting some product market fit, but it wasn't enterprise ready. And I had a vision to make this really enterprise ready, to make it really scalable. And so that's what I've been working on for the past couple of years. And now we're in that place where we solved a lot of the technical issues around AI and XR and multimodal platforms and data collection and also content creation and distribution, and being agnostic with all the different platforms that we work on. But now we have to position the business in a certain way. So it becomes now more product and marketing positioning,
Right.
which is an exciting time for this company. We raised about 11 million for the business so far. We'll raise some more this year. And the customers that we're working with are just phenomenal, from Amazon to the NIH to Frontier and a lot of universities, UTMB, and a lot of governments, a lot of government entities, and a lot of corporate entities, a lot of educational companies, and of course, all of those against the same set of problems about workforce development
Right.
and onboarding and training and knowledge transfer. So those are things that I really care about, because that's the human condition.
Right.
It's performance.
Right.
How do we all want to perform better? We all want to perform better in our jobs. And historically, L&D has had a tech stack that was always based on almost like a content management system.
Mm-hmm.
And the content that was going oftentimes could be good, but maybe not fit for purpose and wasn't updated enough. And the world of on-demand and the world of figuring out how to adapt to a new crisis or a new learning opportunity, it's very hard for traditional L&D to keep up with that,
Right.
especially at the speed of innovation. So it's really important for all of us. So I'm attacking that problem. And we think we found something that's working pretty well. And I think it's been embraced by these large global enterprises and governments and educational systems. So I think we're onto something.
Yeah.
But we're early days, right? Very early days.
Sure. And I've had a chance, as you know, to test out the Verti platform for quite a while. And I think it's phenomenal. I think the innovation you guys have in your delivery, the intelligence behind it, the AI layers that you have involved in it are really impressive. And so looking at just the core business you have today, and also I love the backstory, because you have worked in a lot of cutting edge industries, you have built up teams and built up projects and built up organizations, and it gives you a unique perspective, as you said, almost a project manager and entrepreneur. How today, when Virti is going after maybe a content create, software, whether it's a off the shelf for multiple SKUs, like how does that project start, and how do you manage the different roles and responsibilities within your team as the CEO, but also a CEO who's probably also a project leader CEO?
Yeah, it's a big question. There's a lot of pieces to it, but in simple terms, let's think about, on the one hand, we're a product-led organization.
Right.
We have a platform.
Right.
The platform is meant to be a no-code self-service platform.
Yes.
It didn't start that way, but it evolved that way. And a lot of those projects are driven by a signal that comes from the market. It could be a request, a demand, a sort of movement that's taking place around how people want to buy or use a platform.
Right.
It could come orthogonally from a different market or industry. We're inspired by something happening over here. We say, how can we bring that into our platform? And how can we create a services-oriented platform that we can plug into any new technology really effortlessly, so we're not so precious that everything has to be built by us.
Right.
But what we should be precious about is our point of view. And so from a project perspective, I think it starts with, what are the business drivers? What's the business strategy? And those are very abstract terms.
Sure.
How you interpret those and then move those into your organization is where project management starts to come in.
Right.
It starts with a lot of communication, a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, clarification. Yes, I am a CEO of the company, but I am not directing everything.
Sure.
We have a very strong founder, CTO, head of product, head of immersive content. These are all head of sales, head of account. They all represent signals that represent signals from the customers who we filter in, and we use a lot of data to inform our decisions. Data is not always pure. It has to be filtered and managed and interpreted. But I think I have learned about, sometimes you can use a king-like approach and say, no, we're going to cut out the noise over here. We're going to go for that, even though it could be a 50-50 crapshoot about what's going to work. But once you commit, then it becomes like anything. It's classic Agile methodology, Scrum. You're doing 2-week sprints. We have these processes internally called, we call them OKRs. It's a version of OKRs. It's not quite the same, but it's similar. And we call them VOS2s. But that's an internal proprietary term. But essentially, we've set goals. We have corporate goals. We have team goals. We have individual goals, and they all line up.
They all build up to each other.
We have our annual goals, and we work that back from, but we also have a period where we are, we're saying, these are the kind of customers that we want to work with. These are the kind of brands we want to be associated with. And so that becomes like our aspirational whiteboard session. And then we go after saying, okay, these are the lookalikes. And should we not get this main one that we really like? The lookalikes are pretty good too. And if we do get the main one, we should get the lookalikes as well. So that gives us a sense of how we seed our approach. And that is a form of project management because it's a process. We move it in and then we say, all right, this quarter, we're going to have conversations with these people. And this is our messaging. And this is our value prop. But we have to also really understand their businesses and what their pain points are. And so we do have a lot of consultative selling. But back to project management, we have a mature platform now, but when we were figuring out what to prioritize, it was constant conversations with the customer, talking about what they wanted, or they would be telling us what they needed. And one of the things in a business like ours, when you're building a platform, is prioritization.
Yeah.
And the enemy of prioritization is scope creep, right? And scope creep for any business, it just by definition, it's a problem. In a project management world, you're always ruling by 3 pillars, right?
Right.
You've got time, budget, and scope, right? And you only get one.
Yes.
So this is how you talk about with the customer. And I think internally we talk about the same thing. So I might say, hey, look, this is going to be over the arc of the year, we have these things that we want to accomplish. And our CTO and our head of product and the rest of the team and our head of engineering, we will line up what we want to work on, prioritize based on what we think is best for the platform.
Right.
Either it's technical debt or it's innovation or a combination of the two. And then we chunk them out into our, arcs or themes for the quarter, and we prioritize what we can do, and we see how much we can do in every of those 2-week sprints.
Right.
Now, customers might come in, or we might have a sales cycle, or we have something, and they say, we need this to close this deal, or we need this because they're unhappy and they might churn or something like that. And that's where this scope creep issue becomes really important because we have to make a decision. Do we want to interrupt our flow, which we've established, or do you want to stuff something in at the risk of making something else not as great? We all work with limited resources. I have a small team. I think we punch above our weight. I think everyone is like a superhuman. I think for like 10x, every other human, I think that's what makes us miraculous for such a small team. But that's not scalable.
Right.
And that's not sustainable either. We have to give a reprieve, and we have to be really, from a project management perspective, make sure that we understand the trade-offs when something gets thrown into the system. I think we're pretty gracious, and I think we have a really positive mindset, and we're systems thinkers, and we have a growth mindset. So we're always open to the challenges that come to us from the customers of the market, or maybe something I wake up in the middle of the night with a panic attack about, and the next day I got to tell everyone we have to do this. But those are all forms of scope creep that you manage through project management. And a big piece of that is transparency and communication.
Yeah.
Constant communication and negotiation with the team and letting people have a voice and making sure that they don't feel that they're being steamrolled, that they can push back. And so I think we have a culture where no matter where you are in the organization, you can challenge each other. And most of the times it resolves itself, and everyone logically, rationally, democratically, communicatively, healthily. You can do that in small companies. Yeah. It works itself out. There are a couple times where there might be like jump ball. We need to figure out what side's going to go. But that doesn't happen too much. It's not with much fact. There's really no drama.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's a great point. Thank you for touching on the scope creep part, because that I think is sometimes a unrecognized challenge that a lot of companies deal with. And maybe they don't even know how to label it, but it's something that happens all the time. Projects don't just stay within the confines of how they started. They grow. Yeah. Just like startups and companies ideally don't stay within the confines they started either. They grow. So having a methodology, having a belief system, I think transparency is super important. I've always believed anywhere in enterprise, in business, small business, large business, Fortune 500. It's so important to just be transparent and direct, right? There's so much wasted time in making assumptions as to, is this what so-and-so wants me to do with this project? Is this what this person wants me to do with that? In this meeting, it's just be direct, understand how do you get from point A to point B, whether it's a sales cycle, whether it's a project cycle, how do you get from the start to the finish? Let me veer into some other topics with you, Kurt. So how do you as the CEO kind of decide what tools your team is going to use? And then does that evolve as the business has evolved? Like, how does that work for you guys? I know every company is different. There's no right answer. There's no wrong answer for these types of questions. But I'm curious, like, how have you decided, maybe in the early days when you came in and were tasked with taking over Verti and turning it around and rebuilding it, or maybe later on as you've hit that stride?
Yeah.
How do you make those product app, tool, software decisions as a business?
Yeah. So just to contextualize, we're very much a startup, a
Yep.
venture-backed startup, and we are a young company, not just in terms of how long we've been around, but also the average age is quite young. Some of my team members, it's their first job, some second, but they haven't been. Let's just say I'm the old man in the business, which is both true and I learn a lot from this team. So they grew up as a more, call it a modern startup tech stack
Right.
than when I was coming from at Oracle
Right.
or other large enterprise companies. Where oftentimes these large enterprise companies will use things that they've either built or acquired.
Yeah.
And if it's,
and they have their tech stack set and they know, okay, this is your role. This is what you're going to use.
yeah, and that they can be rather, rigid, but it works because these are large organizations. And here a lot of things that we used were classic SaaS tool. We have lots of tech stacks based on the functions of the business. We have our HR and finance and operations tech stack.
Right.
We have our business development, sales, and CRM sort of tech stack.
Yep.
We have our development, DevOps tech stack. We have our tool building tech stack for VR, for Unity versus our web applications versus our mobile applications, right? So those are all just stacks. But then there's a whole communication tech stack where everything has to work together and talk to each other. In large organizations, you might call those communication platforms. Sometimes people think of them as ERP or sometimes project management, workflows, tech stack. It doesn't really, some people use Excel, Google Docs and suites like that. And we use some of those pieces. I'm not going to list out all our different tech vendors.
Of course.
In fact, it is, they also changed. We've evolved. So what I inherited or what I came into was, for the most part, I would say that we're 60%, 50% is still there. I think the things that have changed, we've changed we have international employees. So we have HR systems that need to adapt to that.
Yes.
So we couldn't use the ones that we were using before. And when we want to onboard someone from another country, I don't want to be limited because our HR and finance system don't support the tax and the other legal hurdles that you have to go through. So we make sure that's all covered. From a finance perspective, and even from a fundraising perspective, things that we do, like for a data room, right? Sharing proprietary data about our business. There's different softwares for that. But almost all of it's web-based.
Right.
So all of it's sort of SaaS business, web-based, things that we can turn on or turn off and not get too married to. And internal communication tools, we use all the classic things that you would use for instant messaging, for project management. There's a variety of things, and we've experimented a lot.
Yeah.
Even our communication tools within the software to communicate with customers.
Yes.
Customer service, CX, those kind of things, what you use to communicate from a SaaS perspective globally with a remote end user group that has to be used to communicate within multiple languages. Those are all considerations. So I would say that every year we do an audit on some of them you don't need to spend much time talking about. This year, we saved $160,000 by doing an audit because new tools were coming out that replaced legacy tools that were being utilized. And so we look at utilization. We have conversations. We talk about alternatives. We talk about things that I look at a stack and I stack rank them by price and by engagement. And we go through that debate. Do we need this? What can we cut it without it? Do we need more? What's the alternative? All those kind of business decisions about buy versus build come in on it. It's part of our annual planning process and budgeting process. It's just like we do it with the sales team, finding about which kind of accounts will grow by what percent, what are the new logos we need to get upper funnel, and what's our conversion rates going to look like, and things like that. There's tools for that, and some of it's still done just with straight up spreadsheet and talking.
Yeah, and evaluating your tools and cutting $160K, and that's no small amount of money, especially in the startup.
I'd love to shame the vendor that we're cutting out from, but it's not gonna it is anyone's best interest. It's just a prudent decision that one has to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's nothing wrong with the products per se. It's just that they're not being used. They're not being used.
Exactly.
And I'm not in the business of holding on and paying a fee every month.
Yeah, and as your business evolves, so does your needs.
And the cool thing is about innovation is there's always something coming out that's better, which is the art of the possible, which is the world that you and I live in. And it's been one of the great benefits for our company to get to work with your organization, whether it's ByteDance at Whole or Pico specifically. It's the amount of innovation that comes out of your enterprise. And you probably see this as well. And you guys are building stuff, you're acquiring stuff, you're blending stuff, you're mixing them together. And we are beneficiaries of that because we get insights about
Right.
how bigger, better companies do it.
And I think one of the consistent approaches, I think, for our company, and I appreciate you hitting on that, is our partnerships are so important, right? Partnerships like Verti and for Meagle, as Meagle is growing in both North America and globally, not only we've got a few 100,000 users already of the platform, but also just our partners who are out there presenting, training, demoing our project management capabilities, our workflow visualizations. I think it's really critical because I've always believed, even as a small business or a large organization, you can't go at it alone. Because if you're operating in that bubble of we know how to do everything ourselves and we don't, we represent ourselves only, I think you miss out on a lot of like down the funnel, down the river, whatever that is, relationships and direct communications.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you gave this label of project management-led sort of CEO, and I think that's a fair and apt description. I am very project focused. I like to see the theme in the beginning, the middle, the end, and the execution, and then benchmarking that and the efficiency, and then I like to do the after action reports and talk about how we can do better, and then iterate and keep going from there. The way that I used to, when I was very sales focused, I would rely on the classic sales stacks, CRM platforms, and there's lots of flavors of them. And I was the early adopter of the first ones when they're cloud-based, and then they got super complicated and big. And then I've used smaller ones that were the next generation, and they grew and got bigger and complicated too. Right. And sometimes what becomes a real strength in a business, they grow and they get two point solutions, grow into multi-point solution, you get enterprise, and it's a normal growth pattern. But my emphasis on spending time in that area, I learned a lot about how to grow something and how to add features and functionality and address a certain customer base at the expense sometimes of hurting other ones, right? And what the trade-offs are. Now that I'm much more in the platform side and the SaaS side of the business, the project management function has become just as important as the CRM function. Whereas before, I never thought of I just thought of project management as straight up Gantt charts. It was a freebie that came with the laptop that you bought, or the enterprise IT stack that you inherited that the IT team ran for you because you were on the operating system. You took this off the shelf. Now it's becoming more and more critical to have tremendous innovation and visualization of data, of ease of integration, of ease of operability, but also understanding so many nuances that are associated with a project. Because we don't have just it's not a linear project. We have tons of little projects happening, and they're all over the place.
Some of them connected, some of them
they all have different orbits. Some are little stepping stones to get to a much bigger piece. Some are smaller, but they all play with each other. And showing those relationships and those interdependencies, that's what it goes back to the trade-offs of scope creep. Having something. Before I used to have to rely on a project manager, or you'd have to have these debates with, and they tell this, and then 2 days later, they come back and they recalibrate everything and they tell you this is what it looked like. And it's all waterfall methodology, right? And so you're dealing with this sort of sequence of events, but the world moves so fast, it just doesn't hold water all the time. So having more agile approaches, there have been tools for that are attacking that in bits and pieces, but they have their limitations too. And so I think there is a lot of room for innovation around project management software that maybe project management is not the right word anymore. I just look at it as it's business imperative, it's mission critical, but it becomes a communication tool because the roadmap, it lives and dies by that project management execution.
I think that's a great point, actually. I feel like the term project management sometimes just triggers a thought of a very siloed view or a very siloed strategy for accomplishing something. And I think your point is spot on. And one of the things, and I try not to make these Process Unpacked podcasts too much of a commercial for Meagle, but one of the things that I think is really unique about the platform, and it ties back to what you talked about very early on in the conversation, is data visualization and the way you can pull together different projects, different workflows, see these snapshots of data that it very critically can help you see either greenfield opportunities or big red flags, big red stop signs that say danger ahead. This project, this effort that you're investing time and resources in is headed in the wrong direction. So maybe you can talk to me a little bit just as whether it's a business owner early on in your career or it's now as CEO of Virti, how does data play an important role in your business? Like, how are you visualizing stuff? And somebody who really has experience in data visualization too. What does that mean for you? And how do you use that information to make key decisions?
Yeah, the discussion internally, obviously, we're very pro data narratives,
Right.
what we're doing, and the infrastructure that we're on are all web-based, so it generates a lot of data.
Yeah.
The I think that's true for any business. The question is less so about the data, but it's about the packaging of the data
Right.
that meets your requirements. So one of the things the CTO Niels and I talk a lot about is that we have so much data in our platform that we should show our customers, and we have these pre-built graphs that our
Right.
customers can see all of this benefit, this impact that they're doing. And our customers love it in the sales cycle. Oh, look at this data that we can play with. But when it comes down to actual implementation,
Right.
our customers' engagement with the data that they have access to and the data that they ask for is actually narrow. And that's something that I find consistently the case. So we have a lot of requests for data. We only surface a fraction of what we can because there's so much in a headset, there's so much data collected.
Yeah.
The headset themselves is a whole data universe.
Yes.
Then you marry that with the web, you marry that with the admin data, the user data, all the performance data, the cohort data, the competitive gamification data that's in our platform. It's a lot. It's a lot to process. So as humans, what my job is to try to really simplify what matters most.
Right.
And then,
And not get lost in an ocean of data.
it's almost, so we have a head of UX,
Right.
Jordan, does a really good job. He's just presenting to us a new dashboard that we're going to launch. And he actually knocked out a bunch of things that were always there from the beginning. And we said, why did you just changed? Everyone expects this to be there. My data says no one uses it. No one's interacted with these things that you guys think are so important. And so now what do? Do I argue? If I'm going to be sincere and authentic, I'm going to trust his analysis of the data.
Sure.
And it's not, the cool thing is about software, you put up the tile, you put the tile back up if someone wants to see the tile.
Yeah.
Right? They can configure their own data, their own dashboards.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be thrown at them because it was a confusing topic of discussion, or it wasn't generated enough data that meant anything to the user, even though we thought as a business it was the most important piece of data to show. That's just a pure, straight up insight that comes from just doing something in the beginning, thinking it's right based on XYZ feedback. And then over time, new people come in and actually do their jobs and use the data to change things properly. And that kind of innovation, I don't want to overplay that example, but that's an example of how we use data. I think the other side of the data is how do we visualize it? Because we have so many different sources and subsystems, they don't all talk to each other. So you need a DevOps, we have data lakes and we have wranglers and we have people who can massage it. But ultimately, we are also putting it into libraries of pre-built charts.
Right.
But using the right chart for the right information is also a narrative. You have to have a sensibility about information design, the Edward Tufte approach. And I'm dropping Edward Tufte.
I don't actually.
He's the Yale professor of information design.
Okay.
He wrote these books called Envisioning Information. He had these courses. I took these courses with him about how to use data appropriately, and also how data can be presented inappropriately and falsified. And you learn a lot about color and the right chart for the right type of story. But it's storytelling with data.
Right.
So his courses were always going back in the history of great map makers and all the way to things like how to show data to show like the NASA shuttle that exploded and how that data got presented and it was erroneous and it was a PowerPoint and it caused a lot of people misinformation because they interpreted because PowerPoint was flat and it led everything to misinterpret the data, whereas other types of formats would have been much more impactful. Anyway, it's a shout out to Edward Tufte. And so I think similarly, we have this sensibility at our organization to use the right type of chart and colors and presentation to keep it simple and clean and light because people are overwhelmed with information and making it accessible to how you present it. So our development team will take different data sources and present it, but we haven't fully resolved those things. We have more to go to be delighted by data.
Yeah.
But the comment you made earlier about data visualization and presenting data in unique ways to give you insights, ultimately that's what the data in the presentation is in service of an insight. Right. That is where AI gets really interesting because when you marry the AI with this dynamic presentation of disparate data sources, it will provide a view that you would never have done through a static library of charts. Once you template them and put them up, your data just runs through it and now we can just collect it and watch it over time. The AI piece of it will then actually start to have cohorts of data and merge things and present potentially new insights. And now with the LLMs, there'll be a language against the chart, because not everyone can also read data. Let's be really clear.
That's very true.
It was not intuitive or native for me to learn the tools of data scientists.
Right.
When I had to learn, they did things in Python and R and Power Builder and all these other tools that people use it was really complicated. And I was trying to distill these large data sets and how does one benchmark that? Like, financial data is much easier for me to process and manage. It's very static and very clear, and you can benchmark it and it's mature. But some of the kind of big data that we deal with in our platforms, you could slice it so many ways and you still can't get an insight from it. So I think the AI piece with the LLMs on top of it put now a voice on top of the data that is proving to be very insightful. I don't say I believe in it 100%. But it's taken me to a new level. That's just an area of, you say visualization, and I'm thinking more of contextualization.
Right. Yeah, that's a good comparison. It doesn't have to be the visuals of the data, but what is the context? What is it coming from, and what is it telling you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how to bring in things that are from months ago or another data source or another company as a benchmark. Like, all that stuff historically has been the domain of analysts and researchers and others. And now we have, imagine the stuff that we used to do when I was a traffic engineer and these big data marts and data lakes. That was the art of the possible then. Today, that's just a activation terminal. Enough to never know mind. It's just there. It's almost free. Whereas before, it would take millions of dollars to set those up and to manage them. Today, almost free. So what's coming up next? Even in order, I know this is not a deep dive into Meegle, but it goes back to these examples of there's innovation that's out there. There's ways to bring it forward.
Yeah.
But the potential is not just in the technology itself. It's in the power user who knows how to harness it, right? And so any tool in anyone's hands can be anything, but you still have to find the right people to really assemble it and bring it together and find a compelling narrative to make those tools work. I mean, there are the G-Wiz stuff about the visual AI that we see today, whether it's image or video or audio. It's just that instant satisfaction, right? Getting to that level of instant satisfaction with sort of core data and operating level, we're still not there yet.
Yeah.
And maybe maybe what you're doing will push us forward.
Yeah, that's the plan. So Kurt, before we wrap up here, how can people stay connected with you, with Verity? What are different ways that they can find you, follow you?
Yeah. So Virti.com, VIRTI.com. I happen to be based in New York City, so Eastern Standard Time. But the team's global. Half our team is in the UK, the other half's in the US and Canada and New Zealand and other places. But yeah, it's the URL. And of course, LinkedIn is always good, but I'm not a super power social media guy. It's a privilege. It's a rarity for me to do these podcasts. I try to stay out of the limelight.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
It's always a privilege to get to speak with you and with partners and to be here in Las Vegas. But yeah, I just encourage anyone who's interested in what we're doing. It's immersive learning with XR and AI, and you can see it at Virti.com.
Yeah, phenomenal platform, VIRTI.com, Verti. Kurt, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for joining us. And again, everyone, thank you for joining us here on Process Unpacked by Meegle. What's Meegle, you ask? It's a cutting-edge project management and workflow visualization platform being used by hundreds of thousands of organizations around the world, everyone from small businesses up to Fortune 500 companies. You can give it a try. It's free. You can download a free trial of Meegle. Just go to Meegle.com. Thank you again, Kurt, for joining us. Greatly appreciated, and I look forward to talking to you and working with you more.
Awesome. Thank you much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Process Unpacked. Follow us wherever you listen to podcasts or start a free trial of Meegle at www.meegle.com.